Okay, and here we go with part 3. We just discussed motivated reasoning. I will say this, Ziva Kunda, rest in peace. She died, maybe 15 years ago now? She's about 40. She died of brain cancer. It was a horrible loss to social psychology and social cognition. She had so much still to contribute, and she'd made such amazing contributions up to this point. She really kind of led the charge for social psychology to embrace the study of motivation, which many social psychologists said didn't exist up to that point. Strange, if you can believe that, through the 80s and 90s. Now, again, more of that if you want to take psychomotivation in the spring. Correcting errors and biases. Okay, so let's say that something has contaminated our thinking. There's some kind of situational or stereotypic contaminant. Is it possible to correct for that? Is it possible to eliminate bias? And Wilson and Brecky say, yeah, it is possible, but there's 6 steps that have to take place for a correction to be made. And if we fail at any one of these sequential steps, then the correction will not be made. So it's an interesting, because it really can be represented in a flow chart. Maybe I should do that. I'll put that in the back of my mind. Maybe do that for the next class. First thing is we got to notice the error or the bias. And notice it could be a diamond step. Do we notice the error or bias? And let's say yes. Now notice, a no says anytime we ask no, anytime we answer no at these diamond decision points, then no correction will be made. So that's where all the no responses go. No correction made. Right? So notice an error or bias? Yes. Well, are we motivated to correct the error? And if we're not motivated, again, no correction. If we are motivated, right, and motivated for whatever reason, maybe we think it's important to be fair, maybe it's a person we like, whatever the motivation is, the source, right? If we're motivated to correct the error, then the next step for us is, what is the direction of the error? Is my error making me biased in favor, or is my error making me biased against? Right? And we're really good at that. Duh. Right? Boy, I'm biased against this person, or I'm biased for this person. So I like to think of it in terms of a hiring situation. Let's say I'm interviewing 3 applicants today, and the first applicant comes in, and I'm not too affected. I mean, they're a decent applicant on paper, at least. They look okay. And I'm like, yeah, okay, thank you very much for the interview. We'll get back to you. And then the second person comes in, and I turn around as they're entering. I spin my chair around and I look at this person, and they're a dead ringer for my ex-wife. And we had a very, very bitter divorce, right? And all these horrible things happen, and I look and I go, oh my God. Their appearance, their identical appearance to my ex, this is definitely not in their favor. This is biasing me against them, right? Easy to tell. But let's suppose the next applicant comes in and they're an Ohio State student. And I'm like, oh my God, they graduated with honors from Ohio State. Go Bucks, right? And now I'm biased in favor. So determining the direction isn't too difficult. But determining the next step, the magnitude of the error, how much bias does this represent? Did this bias me a little bit in favor or against? Or did it bias me a whole bunch, right? That is very difficult. And we did a lot of studies in the Tetlock lab in a legal decision making, where we were experimenting with looking at people's bias, and then we would make people aware of their bias, and sure enough, people could always pick the correct direction of their bias. And when we asked them to adjust on the basis of the bias, they adjusted in the correct direction, but they never adjusted enough. So their magnitude estimate was a little shaky, right? And that was kind of a universal finding we had. Now, are you able to correct the error? And let's go back to this kind of personnel selection. Let's suppose now I'm betwixt and between. I got one candidate I'm neutral on. I got another candidate that I'm biased against, admittedly. I got another candidate I'm biased for. And I'm trying to sort this out. And it's going to take me a little time to think through this, right? And then the boss calls me and says, have you hired anybody yet? And I'm like, I'm working on it, boss. And I say, I don't want to hear what you have to say about that. You need to hire someone like yesterday. So either get someone hired now, or maybe you should post your own job. And I'm like, oh shit. I'm going with the OSU candidate, right? Because I wasn't able to correct for the error, right? I didn't have the time. But if I'm allowed the time, then I'm going to make the correction. I'm going to assess the correction and make the correction. So within this hiring bias context, if you take personnel psych next semester, we do our best to use mechanisms, to use tools to design systems where bias can't enter into it whatsoever. That's impossible. That's the ultimate goal. So if you're interested in that, we got a lot to say about it, and I think you'll enjoy the class if you take it. At least you'll survive it. I've never lost anyone in a class. I mean, survival was. So some people drop it. So minimize bias in hiring, then hiring and interviewing. Okay, people have to investigate their schemas. They have to investigate their stereotypes about people in the world, and they need to be made aware of that. So once you understand your stereotypes, you understand how your schemas affect your thinking, then you can begin to correct for them. Remember the Wilson and Brecky model? If you're not aware of the nature of your bias, then you're not going to correct for it. So, and you really have to do this consistent with organizational values, right? It's not just you alone in this. It's what is the organization value, and how do my schemas or biases, either are they consistent with the organizational values, or are they, maybe somewhat opposed? Okay. For hiring, less reliance on opinion, more reliance on verifiable, repeatable interviewing techniques and selection criteria, right? And that is standardized interviews where everyone is asked the same question in the same order, right? And this is important. There's been research that's shown when we have people interview white applicants, white interviewers, interview white applicants versus white interviewers interviewing black applicants, what we notice in the videotapes of these interviews is white interviewers will persist longer in the interview with white candidates than they will with black candidates. White interviewers make more eye contact with white candidates rather than black candidates. And they're more conversational and they ask more questions with white candidates than black candidates. So note that in these types of subjective interviews, right, it's the schema work, the stereotypes, etc., non-consciously operating, that really give white applicants a different interview process than black applicants. And that's something we have to eliminate. So one thing we do is rely less and less on the interview, and if we use interviews, they're standardized interviews, same order of questions, right? Same rubric used to score them. There's an actual rubric used to score the interview responses. But if we can dump interviews altogether, we're going to be better off and look at performance-based measures. For example, when we would hire someone to teach at Columbus State, and I sat on a bunch of hiring committees there, given that I was a tenured professor at Columbus State. You got to teach a lot of Psych 1100 at Columbus State in the psychology department. That's going to be your bread and butter. That's what you're going to be teaching the most. And one of the things we would do is say, hey, we need a 10-minute lecturette on the functions of a neuron. This is a performance-based interview, and we have an absolute scoring rubric. So the person presents themselves for 10 minutes, right? And we assess things like clarity, right? Completeness, tone, etc. All the things that would be important to delivering a good lecture. And so that's a performance-based technique. Notice, we're not asking people questions about their experience or any of that kind of nonsense, because that can be captured in a resume. What we're doing is actually watching them perform and evaluating it. Everyone evaluated the same, evaluated by the same people using an objective rubric. Okay? And this gets to the idea of multiple decision makers. We have 4 people sitting in on this on this performance, evaluating it, and then in fact, then we combine the scores. So if you come and you perform for us, your ultimate score for that portion of the hiring process is the average of 4 interviewers. Okay? Multiple decision makers make better decisions. And something that I've been talking about in personnel psych, and I'd like to explore more, is blind interview procedures wherever possible. That is where we don't know the applicant. And this there's some interesting ideas. I had a hearing impaired student in the class one semester, and interestingly, the hearing impaired student had someone come with them, supplied by the university, right, who transcribed everything I said. You know, guys know I talk pretty fast, and this amazed me to watch a transcriptionist, right, the transcriber, which is, I don't know which is the proper term, and they would just fly. They're a former court reporter, right, and as they're transcribing it, it's appearing on the student's laptop. So the student got real time, I mean, pretty much real time visual output of my speech. And I'm thinking, you know, I could see where that might be useful in interview processes if you wanted to do blind interviews. Because now the interviewee, right, and the interviewers don't have to see each other. You could have a transcriptionist in between. So we couldn't hear things like tone of voice, which can tell us about accents, what might activate stereotypes. We're not going to be able to see the person, so gender is now removed, and ethnicity is now removed from part of the evaluation process as well. I'm really fascinated in this concept, so I think we need to explore that more. So, minimizing bias in appraisals, performance appraisal, what do we know? Measuring performance, what criteria? You guys have already done an assignment on that. I'm really super important on this, I think. All should participate in the criteria selection, and I talked about, remember, the employee negotiating the criteria with the employer, right? Going to objective measures rather than subjective measures, and continuous improvement measures are increasingly objective, reliable, and valid is the goal there. And then, of course, this all requires super good record keeping and reporting. So, think about it though. When people are being evaluated, what does an employee want to need to know coming out of a feedback session? Employee 1, hey, what am I supposed to be doing? 2, what is the expectation? That is, how well am I required to do it? 3, what we're talking about here is, how well do you think I did it? That is the evaluation of my performance. And note, the people want to know how they're going to be rewarded. That's coming up. That's going to be like the next assignment, if I remember correctly, right, is the reward systems, and then people want to know how they can improve their performance. And I think that's really key to good evaluation. And notice, all these biases that we've talked about, if we develop objective measures, we can start answering questions for employees in a way that they want them answered objectively. Okay. So, here is your assignment. Subject, perceptual errors, defined and avoided. And what I'm asking you to do for this assignment, please produce a short video, 5 minutes or less. 5 minutes is a pretty long video. I know. You say, dude, you do your lessons like hour and a half, frickin' 3 hours, and you're telling us to be short or brief. I'm saying for your sake, right? So my expectations are, 3 to 5 minutes, okay? Designed for folks in your organization that explains one of the perceptual errors that I'm going to list, right, with an example of said error and a suggestion of how to avoid or correct for it. So really, the components are relatively simple. Pick an error, right, give a demonstration, some kind of example of that error, explain how the error works, right, and then a suggestion on how to avoid it. So this is something that would be used for hiring personnel. It would be for supervisors who rate other people, right? But let me know what your audience is. So, and what do you get to choose from? You can do halo effect, you can do primacy effect, you can do recency effect, you can do contrast effect, fundamental attribution error, actor-observer, ultimate attribution error, motivated reasoning, self-fulfilling prophecy, any one of those, right? And I mean, if none of those appeal to you and you got an idea to do something else, then let me know. Shoot me an email, whatever. Come to office hours, come to our live session, and say, hey, what do you think? To be submitted, the video, the script of the video. So I expect you to have a script. Now, this doesn't have to be a complete verbatim script. I rarely use a script. In fact, I found that it's very difficult for me to do what I need to do following a script. Now, what I do and what facilitates my lecturing style is bullet points. That is an outline. So you'll notice that as long as I have an outline, I'm good to go. So there you go. The script for the video, which could be an outline of the points that you just want to cover. A summary sheet that includes the intended audience description, so who's it for? Statement of purpose for the video training. What the hell are you trying to accomplish? And note that this is like the Holy Trinity. The need is assumed. The program design is really what's being addressed there, and the program evaluation is being left for another time. But then a possible pre-video measure and post-video to kind of round it out. That is, could you measure something before your people see the video, something in their performance, and then could you measure something post-video, maybe measure the same thing, and then show that the video had an impact, and that would be the kind of the evaluation aspect of the Holy Trinity. So that would be to measure the measure to demonstrate video effectiveness. And I think that's important. Consider, you know, that many times training videos, I have to take training videos all the time, right? And so I take a Title IX, or I take a diversity training video. Did it do anything? I mean, you can evaluate to see if I learned the content. That is, you can give me a short quiz at the end of the video and say, oh yeah, they listened and they're able to answer the questions about the video. But did it have an impact on my future performance? And what might that look like? So play with that, and there's a lot of flexibility here. I think the most fun, though, I'm hoping for you guys is the production of video. And that's relatively easy to do. This could be a cell phone video or whatever else. The challenge is going to be, though, since we're working remotely, right, how might this take place? So it's possible you could do it in a Zoom session and save the Zoom session. Think about that, right? You can save the Zoom session, and you could turn that in. That's just another suggestion. So I'll leave it up to you guys, because you guys are likely more tech savvy than I am. So enjoy, and I hope you have a good time with it. And there you go, the end. And there you go, this side of my house. Check out that picket fence and pergola that my neighbor Wilson and I built. And Wilson and I love to do this stuff. So we love to work with our hands. We love to design, and we were pretty proud of this. We thought it came out pretty nicely. At least it's a little nicer than the neighbor's fence, which you can see over to the edge there. And that's a whole nother story. I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope you enjoy this homework assignment. We're getting towards the end, guys. It's creeping up on us, so let's just redouble our efforts. Let's push hard. I know it's time to kind of let the doldrums hit. Let's take a breath, reorient ourselves, and let's get our end game in order and execute here a highly successful end game. Remember, what effect would we be capitalizing on with an awesome end game? Well, I'm going to leave that for you to look up the effects. Okay. Take care. Have a great day.